Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. We usually stand behind the stage and the camera, not all of us, but me for sure. So that's a start today, hosting a panel. I am Vaso Batsomitru. I am the communications director of IMED, the organization that hosts this forum, and the name stands for Incubator for Media Education and Development. So, hello ladies, how are you? Before we dive into today's topic, let's address the elephant in the room, the light-hearted rivalry between journalists and communications professionals. The old joke goes that those who fail as journalists end up in communications or PR. No, I don't see any fail here. But in today's media landscape, there's a stereotype we can safely leave behind. Communications has evolved dramatically, and our roles have expanded far beyond the traditional PR and marketing models of the past. We no longer just write press releases. Actually, AI does that better than us. We don't pitch stories to media, at least not over dinner. Now we are deeply involved in content strategy, digital outreach, navigating algorithms, and ensuring that real stories get the attention and impact they deserve. In fact, new roles have emerged for communications professionals, like content strategists, product managers, engagement specialists, and media analysts. Personally, I did not always work in journalism. Before joining IMED, I worked for a multinational company known for being a marketing pioneer. Working there, I learned a lot about creating stories that stop your thumbnail. But something shifted for me when I moved into journalism. Here, we are not creating stories for branding or sales, communicating real stories that matter, amplifying the truth versus selling a product. That's a profound difference, and it's changed the way I view the power of communication. At IMED, along with Konstantinos, Evgenios, Athina, and Eleni, my communications team, we focus on making sure that the stories journalists create don't just fade into the background. We aim to ensure these stories reach the right people, create an impact, and foster positive change. Our golden rule is to work closely with the journalist from day one, from the initial pitch in an editorial meeting to the final story. We collaborate with the journalist to stay true to the narrative while choosing the best platforms, the best tools and materials to promote it effectively, moving beyond clickbait to create deeper, long-term audience participation. Today, we will explore how communication strategies can help bridge the gap between a published story and its audience. We'll do that through diving into real-life examples taken from the experience of our invited speakers. They each bring unique insights into how communications and journalism interact. Allow me to introduce them to you. First, Katerina Macha, Director of News and Information Research at Pew Research Center, where she leads a team that explores news habits and attitudes in the US and Europe. She is a political scientist and a leading expert on the impact of technology and politics on the news landscape, utilizing diverse methodologies, including surveys and computational analysis. To Katerina's right, we can see Laura Ranca, program expert in investigations and training at Tactical Tech, trains investigators and journalists on OSINT techniques and exposes corporate misuse of personal data, bringing critical stories to light through investigative work. Then you can meet Erin Stock, Deputy Vice President of Communications at the International Center for Journalists, ICFJ. Erin helps journalists worldwide, a lot of them, to tell impactful stories, drawing from her background in both journalism and global communications. And lastly, certainly not least, we have Diana Riojas, Audience Manager for Engagement and Distribution at The City. Diana ensures that the city's journalism reaches its audience while fostering meaningful connections between readers and the newsrooms, as well as local communities in New York City. Together, they cover a wide spectrum of expertise, from audience engagement to investigative research, and today they will share how communication strategies can bridge the gap between journalism and the public, and ultimately explore how to communicate information which is of interest to the public, mind you, a service and certainly not a product, and how to reverse the mistrust that often surrounds marketing, us. Before we move on to the discussion, allow me to ask you something, and please raise your hands to share your answer. How many of you are journalists? How many of you are communications professionals? How many of you do both? Ladies, now you know your audience, so we may begin, because first we need to know our audience. So, today's media landscape is rapidly evolving, with shifting consumption habits making traditional methods less effective. Katerina, can you describe this evolving news environment for us? What has changed in this consumption?
First of all, thank you for having me. I want to say I'm the pollster, so usually I ask the questions and the public answer, so you took it away from me. So I'm sure you all have heard that the media environment has been changing, there is developments. Yes, that has been happening for at least the past 20 years, right? So let's think about what are the things that are changing, what do we know, and what is the context, right, that we're all trying to address here and reach audiences, as you say. And what I can do here, and I hope to provide all of you, is the perspective of the public, right? That's kind of my job. I've been doing this for now almost 20 years of understanding the public, where they see it and how they're consuming information. So there is 4 kind of like big developments, and much of what I'm gonna share is the US. A lot of it is also applicable in Europe. First, the increased digitization of news, right? You all have heard it. There is the internet, the web, right? It has dramatically changed of how we consume news, and not only for younger people at this point, pretty much for everybody. And when we're thinking about digitization, we're thinking about platforms, right? The way we're getting news, like it's not in print necessarily, it's not in radio or TV, it could be in any different ways, right? And the big elephant maybe in the room, social media, right? Social media has created this networked environment, right? We are seeing in our data, news consumption has skyrocketed in these platforms, and at the same time has been compartmentalized and fragmented, right? The second element of this context is the rise of alternative sources, and especially for all of you, as you're thinking about being journalists or communications professionals or both, it is this idea that the way legacy media used to occupy, right, the news information environment and take most of that space, that's no longer the case. What we're seeing in our data is the rise of podcasting, the rise of different types of social media, right? The rise of different sources, right, on providing news and information. It's not just journalists anymore, right? It could be any of you or all of you and anyone down the street. I have 2 more things to add to that context. Polarization. I know that word has been played recently in some of the panels that I've seen. The increased political and partisan differences that people are basically making their news choices even based on that. So basically your partisan identity really plays a role in who you choose to trust, who you choose to actually consume news from, and whether you want a source to basically verify or confirm your biases or your own beliefs, right? And The fourth one that it's kind of like really, really important here is the economics of the journalism profession. It's the fact that journalism is in a crisis and has been in a crisis the past 20 years, right? It's really difficult to make money, it's difficult to invest, and it's important for the people that they're bringing you the stories, right? We are seeing this, like, it's all of this is happening at a time where people and newsrooms are closing or they're downsizing or they're shifting resources. So I hope that gives you kind of like a lot. I'll try to do my best to summarize everything of what's happening in the past 20 years in the world. So think about it now that as we talk through some of the strategies and everything, that all of this is happening in this context.
Thank you so much, Katerina. She can share more at 6:30. She's moderating a panel at the main hall about news avoidance, and I think you should be there. I will be. So, in the digital era, understanding audience behavior and engagement is critical. Diana, what strategies does the city employ to understand and engage diverse audiences? How do you adapt your content to meet their needs?
Yeah, so at the city, and just to give you some context on my newsroom, we launched 5 years ago, right before the pandemic, and we're completely digital. You know, there's no print circulation with us. And basically, at the inception of our newsroom, we were constantly wanting to know, okay, we're new to this game, and New York City media is not. You know, there's a bunch of media out there, but how can we really differentiate ourselves? And the main way we've been doing that, and it's really just been like one of our core missions, is making sure that everyday New Yorkers, there are questions on the ever-evolving, ever-complex way of life in New York City, their questions are getting answered. So much so that like we have created a whole series called How to New York, which exactly how it sounds, you know. Whether you're a New Yorker that has lived there your whole entire life, or you just moved there, or you know you just moved out of your parents' home in New York, if you have a question that maybe is very simple in hindsight, but actually is not, you can ask our newsroom. And we even have a dedicated reporter / editor who does that explanatory journalism. Her name is Rachel Holiday Smith, and every day, you know, our newsroom gets questions submitted through our website or through our question portal called Ask Nellie, which is our newsroom mascot, and she's a little pigeon. She's very cute. Not real, but that's our little logo. And she will look at those questions and like all those submissions, and she will be like, huh, I've never thought about this. The newsroom hasn't thought about this, and we should. So some of the explainers that she has created are simple as, how do I throw a block party in my neighborhood? Or how do I join my local community board that makes really consequential decisions in my neighborhood? And sometimes it's a very simple 1, 2, 3, here's how you do it. And then other times it's a lot more nuanced. So one example of that is, we did an explainer on New York on how to know if your apartment is rent stabilized in New York City. And if you don't know what rent stabilization is, it's basically New York City has 1 million apartments where each year a board will vote on how much your apartment, how much your rent can really go up. And, you know, that means your landlord can't necessarily hike up your rent 20, 30% in an effort to like kick you out or make you pay more if the apartment is becoming more and more gentrified. And, you know, that question, it seems simple, like, oh, who do I have to talk to in city government and state government to get that answer? But, you know, we realize that when you get your rent stabilized history, it's not necessarily like the most easiest thing to interpret. So she really went down the rabbit hole of explaining every little thing that you get when you do submit your rent history and what it all means. So yeah, that's basically how we've been really trying to find a way or try to get people to know who we are and like how we can help them, because you know, the city, we do a lot of investigative journalism and we really dig deep on the mayor, for example, but we really care about what New Yorkers have to say, and you know, those explainers have really done us a wealth of good.
Thank you so much, Diana. Erin, ICFJ, a huge organization with a network of more than 170,000 journalists from all over the world. What are some examples you've seen of news organizations effectively engaging with their audiences?
Yeah, well, I want to share two examples with you all that I hope will inspire some of you in the room. The first comes from Colombia. We have a partner organization there called Mutante, and they are committed to participatory journalism for social change. And through a project with ICFJ, they developed a tool called the Comments Library. And it's a system they use to collect, categorize, and act on comments that are added to their social media posts. As an example, they did a huge piece of coverage on violence against girls across Latin America. Based on the comments they received, they decided to develop a resource for women survivors of gender-based violence. It's a directory of low cost and free resources, legal and mental health resources. And that's just one example of the kind of very responsive, journalistic content they produce based on the comments they receive. And because they've gotten really systematic about it, they can now tell you that they have responded to 28% of all the comments they've received on their social media posts with some kind of follow-up, a resource, additional coverage that is engaging directly with the needs of their community. The second example comes from the United States. It's an ICFJ Knight Fellow co-founded an organization called Fact Chequeado, and they're committed to stopping the spread, or slowing the spread at least, of disinformation targeting Spanish speakers in the United States, which is a huge problem. 40 million households speak Spanish in the United States, and it's a very underserved community in terms of the news media. This is an example of a group that has been able to scale participatory journalism, and they've done it through collaboration. Today, they have over 100 partners, and these are mostly newsrooms. Some are one-person teams or two-people teams, very tiny local news outfits. Others are as large as Gannett. And they are collaborating with these partners. Every week they meet. They talk about what disinformation is spreading, what are you hearing, what do you need us to debunk. They create those materials, they get shared across the board. And so it allows them to respond at scale to the disinformation that their communities are facing, and to do it more efficiently because they're sharing and collaborating.
Thank you so much. So let's speak about repackaging content. You know this word is where you have the initial story, and then we, communications experts, try to figure out a way to make you go and read or hear or see the story a journalist has produced. Laura, you can help us with that. Your extensive experience at Tactical Tech and your work as an investigator, she is a member of this forum's community more than me. Can you give examples of how projects like The Classroom have used interactive formats, both online but also in person, to engage people?
Right. Hi, everyone. So I work for an organization called Tactical Tech, which is an NGO that is based in Berlin, in Germany, but it operates internationally. And we're quite old. We're 21 years old, and for 21 years, this organization has been investigating the interaction between civil society and technology. And as technology evolves, our research changes and our investigations obviously adapt, which means that in order to kind of relay a lot of the information that we investigate about how technology impacts our lives and our communities, we have to find new ways to always bring this research and this investigation to the public, because we are doing kind of a public service in a way. We're trying to make people aware about various ways in which their digital and physical life is influenced through the devices they use and through the technologies that they adopt on a daily basis. And our work is kind of two-folded. We have, as Vaso was saying, we do investigations, so we have this journalistic investigative angle to technology, but we also are quite a creative community, so we work with journalists, with artists, researchers, technologists, and a lot of the work that we do becomes a product in the public space. So we operate in kind of two sections, I'd say. We have something that's called a Tactical Tech Studio, which is the creative part of the organization that produces a lot of work such as exhibitions and public interventions in open air spaces. So we don't always have closed rooms or closed spaces where our work is displayed, but also outside. And as Vaso was mentioning, we run a project that's called The Glassroom, and The Glassroom is a traveling exhibition that has multiple formats. It has also a super high-tech, very elaborate, more sophisticated type of installation that involves a lot of interactive material, a lot of large visualizations, apps. People can interact with all these objects, and they can learn about various technologies and their role in their daily lives. We also have been inspired by the pandemic and by the rise in surveillance and monitoring technologies during the pandemic. So we have created this open air exhibition that is called Everything Will Be Fine. One, to just make people feel better, but actually Everything Will Be Fine is an exhibition that was looking into the way people react in the face of crisis. Do you run or do you face it? Whatever you do, everything will be fine. You will find a way. So the exhibition was around the technologies that were influencing and changing our lives, whereas also keeping us safe. We work a lot now with materials, bringing these materials about tech and tech influence to children and very young people, which means that now we have a similar exhibition like the Glassroom and similar materials for kids that go also in public spaces but also in schools. So a lot of the research we do now gets relabeled and reshaped in a much more accessible, much more interactive and fun way for children. And we've done this work with children. So it wasn't a bunch of adults in the office doing the work, but we went out and looked for groups and schools and communities where children can get involved in producing such materials on the topics that affect them, such as their use of technology and devices and the way they interact even with parents about technology. And I'm going to go to the second part of our work, which is actually the investigative part, which I didn't want to start with because now we're talking about repackaging content. But behind all this content, it's a lot of investigation, a lot of work that we are doing with journalists, with campaigners, with researchers and scientists. And this we call the Tactical Tech Institute, where actually a lot of people come together and investigate topics starting from the ways in which we can use technology to investigate issues better. So we run trainings, we run varying investigation institutes where people come together and dig into topics. They work on issues like climate change adaptation and related technologies. We look at border controls and related technologies. We look at how data is being gathered and used for various commercial purposes. And we investigate all these aspects behind the technologies, but also the companies that are running all these technologies and the investments that go in and the money that goes out. So just two very brief cases. One case that we did based on an investigation is called Mapping Digital Empires. We investigated for quite a few years the GAFAM empire, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and Apple. And we looked at investments that they receive, investments they make, acquisitions, and all the financial aspects and flows behind what they're producing and what they're running in terms of technology. We stopped for this situation, for this case called Mapping Digital Empires, we focused on Google because it is the greatest. evolves. So we took data from their beginning up until 2022, when we stopped the actual collection of data, and we transformed it into an exhibit, because we thought it's absolutely impossible to present such data to people and make sure that they actually care. Nobody would care, of course. Our point was not to make people stop using Google products, but to make people understand what goes behind the technology they use and what data is being gathered and where it goes, which companies have access to it. And of course, there are in the thousands of companies that have access to data of someone who just uses a Gmail account, right? So we did these installations where we had people correlate the data that we actually created, the numbers, the amounts of money that are run through Alphabet, the company that runs Google. And we've created different formats. There are formats in which people can actually trace the money flows with colored pens, and based on the data that is offered to them in the exhibition space, they can actually make the mapping themselves. We've had things that we've already made. They're already made, like threads that were running through different points of financial flows, so people can actually trace them, look at them. And we had electronic, sort of more interactive, but also more high-tech, let's say, installations where you could press buttons and see per year, each year, how the empire grows and what happens, every year, what money comes in, what money comes out. So these are things that people interact with, and then they start looking, from the object, they go to the data, then they go to the methodology, and they're interested. How did you get all this amount of data? So it makes people kind of become curious about how information gets collected. Another one, which is quite fun, is called the Opinionator, which is a traveling installation that we also present in quite a lot of exhibitions and in museums as well. The Opinionator looks at another type of research we're doing, which is about political influence and how political actors join forces with data brokers and with marketing companies to actually influence opinions, political opinions, and ultimately to gather votes during elections, right? So the Opinionator is an avatar that teaches users how to influence opinions. It teaches them to use three main public influencing methods: A/B testing, geo-targeting, so targeting people with messaging based on the geography, based on where they are based, and social listening, changing behavior, changing a product based on what people think about it and how they speak about it on social media. So people who use it will learn how to do this influencing better on, social media. And I think I'm going to stop here and let you.
These two were two great examples of how we can communicate a story but make it very relevant and very approachable to people. Actually, sorry, I can't help myself. We also have a great data installation out at the main hall where one can interact and actually play with buttons to find out where the Press Freedom Index, as mapped out by the RSF team, places each country. I'm sure you will be curious to find yours. We were curious and disappointed to find Greece. So you have to look way down. And I will go back to Erin because I feel she has some important insights to share when it comes to considerations journalists have to take in mind while creating a story that should reach people but still maintain the integrity, which is a core value that has caused some mistrust between communications and journalists. The integrity of the story, how is it maintained, Erin?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm one of the people who would have raised my hand when Vaso asked, are you a journalist and a communicator? I started out as a journalist, and I, like so many of you, I imagine, wanted to be a reporter because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to have an impact. And the reality is that in today's media environment, the one Kat laid out, to have an impact with your reporting, you really do need to think like a communications professional. And Vaso mentioned it starts with knowing who you are trying to reach and getting super clear on that. Because only then can you start to explore the strategies to reach those people with your materials, obviously. So I think that is a huge piece of this work today, even more than it was when I started. And a big part of it is figuring out what to do, how to reach people, and what not to do. Deciding that that's not worth the investment. Like, we're all short-staffed and stretched thin, and you could do more and more and more when it comes to outreach and communications and being on this platform and that platform and trying this and trying that. And when you understand your audience, their needs, their behaviors, and what you're trying to accomplish, only then can you prioritize where to invest your time and your resources. Also, I think it's important to remember that what we're doing as journalists and communicators is it's building trust. Another way we might say this, although more controversial, building your brand, which is one that you need people to
You know they're afraid
trust.
of this word. It's stories.
Yeah, but I say that because sometimes we get hyper-focused on like one investigation or one report and getting that to people, but it's a long road. It's built over multiple engagements and deepening engagement over time. And so that is also something to bring into focus in your work. And I would also say it was exciting to hear Laura talk about this. I know Diana is going to talk a little bit more about this, but just that we need a lot of entry points into the work. That, you know, on top of your investigative or your research or your investigative report, you know, think about the side story that has the 3 biggest revelations out of the piece. Think about the podcast you can get on where you can talk about the story behind the story. All these, you have to be so multifaceted in your comm strategy these days. And part of it is creating entry points and tracking what worked and leaning into that while deprioritizing the stuff that isn't working for your particular audience. So, yeah, a few comments on that. I'll end there.
Can I hijack? I'm hijacking your order.
course.
You can yell at me right after this thing, because I think you said 2 things, like the branding, like giving you a bit of that perspective and research on this. It does matter, and I know journalists, it's, of course, you pursue the truth, right? That's like the holy grail, right? But what we are seeing on and on is this special relationship that people have with the news organization that they mostly trust and they follow. That is a relationship that it is, if you manage to have it, you can keep it. Like, you can maintain it and really cultivate it. And it is important. Like, we are seeing people, like one of our research, it was a long time ago, people that they actually access information online directly from a news source or, you know, a news brand, an organization, they're more likely to remember it and more likely to trust it than just encountering that information on social media. So think about this. Like, there is this direct link, right, of people and the source.
Thank you so much. I think it all leads to Diana because she has a great example to share about actually all this you've just talked about, how we build trust and what clever ways the city has found to do that through a wonderful project.
Yeah. Do you mind just passing me the clicker? Thank you. Yeah, so do it this way. At the city, you know, we're constantly trying to find people who may not necessarily be keen into our journalism. And one way we've been trying to do that is through our community outreach projects. So earlier this year, one of our reporters, Samantha Maldonado, she did a series on New York City's 4 toxic sites. They're Superfund sites. And if you don't know what like a Superfund site is, it's essentially places in New York, actually, these little 4 sites here, where the contamination there is so toxic and so hazardous that it's actually harmful for human and the environment as well. And you know, she did the reporting, she did the series, and what we really wanted to do on the audience side is make sure that this story, this series, really reached people who actually lived and worked in near these sites, and we wanted to hear from them. So yeah, we created this postcard. Okay, there you go. And we sent it out to people that actually live in these mailing routes right over here. This is one site called the Wicked Alport Chemical Plant, and then this is the whole entire route that we sent our postcards to. And in the postcard, we kind of asked them like, hey, if come to our event where we're going to be talking about our reporting, but we'll also answer your questions that you have. And you know, among the crowd and among the people that actually got the postcard was this factory owner whose factory was actually right down the street from Wilco Alport. And that company was around in the 1940s during World War II, and they were tasked with processing radioactive material. And even up until 1947, they were dumping that radioactive soil around their plant and around their factory, but also in New York City's sewer system. And, you know, the guy that came, he didn't know what the city was. He didn't really know our newsroom. He just got the postcard. But he knew about Wilf Alport. And that was a concern of him for years. You know, he was concerned, like, what was going to happen if it was hazardous? Is this something that's going to affect my business as they do this cleanup process? And, you know, he wasn't the only one at the event where, you know, where people were sharing like these really complicated and nuanced questions. So we told them, I'm like, hey, sign up for our newsletter and we will send you a special dispatch answering your specific questions. And then we'll also post it on our website too. And that was kind of like the home run for us, you know, because now these people were in our feedback system. They knew about who our reporter was and that she was dedicated to this kind of work. They knew how to reach our newsroom if they have a tip or if they have a question that goes into this further. And they even knew, they even signed up for our newsletter, so they were becoming active readers. And that all kind of happened through one postcard, through one event. And those habits, you know, if you're just reading The City or if you just follow us on social media, for example, those habits can easily take months or even years to really exercise and create with our readers. But in one event, they were like deeply engaged with our content and they knew our mission too. All that to say is that, you know, we've done multiple iterations of this project. Sometimes they're heavily tied to our investigative journalism, and then other times they're based on our service questions that we get. And this is the one that I was talking about earlier before. So all that to say, like, we've been fine-tuning these postcards, and what's nice about it is that in each iteration, we've gotten the same kind of results and the same kind of ask, which is like we're reaching New Yorkers who keep giving us more questions that, you know, we're creating explainers for.
So we're building trust, and how can we, Erin, communications professionals, ensure ethical content dissemination? How can we address misinformation?
Yeah, well, I want to assure all the journalists in the room that us communications professionals also operate with a code of ethics. And essentially, the best communications is authentic, it's honest, and it's engaging, and those things are not mutually exclusive. I think if you find yourself or a colleague resorting to more sensational style headline writing or efforts that aren't that authentic and honest, it's because we're not being creative enough. So I think it's important to have high standards for the work. And somebody said this at an earlier session, and I thought it was so on point. They were talking about AI and how, well, it's not like we haven't had standards for hundreds of years around these topics. The technology has changed, but our standards have not. And that is true, I think, for journalists and for the people who support them, the communications professionals who do this work because they want to advance social good in the world. So where that line is, it's a constant conversation with you, with your colleagues, and I think my number one pro tip here is to never act in isolation on these things, to collaborate and to always gut check yourself, again, with the reporter you're working on the story with, and also, I can't leave the stage without saying the word transparency because it goes back to brand or trust building, transparency in all that you do, and that goes from explaining how you got where you did, whether you used certain tools like AI, and also admitting your mistakes, which has been a standard for all of us for many, many years. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. So we have more time.
Thank you so much. And now I would like to speak a little bit about local journalism and why. Because it plays a crucial role in community engagement and what we've been talking about, trust. And how does local journalism, Katerina, contribute to bridging this gap?
I love local journalism. It's the one area that I love to research. And it kind of changed so I'm Greek, for those that you might not have realized, I am. Also don't appreciate how we're always in the low ranks of things. Like, let's advertise maybe where we are high.
We can fix this.
Yes. So anyways, so when I moved to the US and I started, researching, I never thought of local journalism the same way, right? Like in Europe, there is, but it's a bit of a different beast, right? But in the US, it's so crucial. It's so important because of the vastness, right, of the country. So getting to your question, everything that I said in the beginning of the context that we are, right, and you're thinking about as journalism today, there are a lot of bright spots when it comes to local journalism. And two of them is that there is way less or no polarization, which is really remarkable. If you're thinking about the nationalization of news, right, that everything is always seen through this prism of partisanship and it's always about winners and losers, that is not the case. Not that there's no winners and losers, but that's not the case in terms of like thinking about it as conservatives and liberals when it comes to local journalism. And I'm sure you can all relate to that, right? Because the issues that local journalism deals with, crime, right? Local politicians, whether your neighborhood is clean, right? Whether you can walk safely to school, your kid, right? These are things that they are universal and everyone cares about. And beyond like the second point about local journalism is how people are embedded in the community. And one of the things that we've seen data after data, research after research, is that the journalists that they are more embedded in the community, those people that they have come in a communication, that have talked to a journalist, they're more likely to trust the media, their local media, they're more likely to assess their media on positive ways. So if you think about it, there are ways to reach that audience. Basically, get to meet the public, right? And be there and talk to them. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. So the clock is ticking. I would like to pause this discussion and turn a bit to our audience and ask if you have any questions that our speakers could answer for you. Yes, please.
Do you think local media intend to spread fake news as much as mainstream independent media? I mean, for example, it's common for local media to spread conspiracy theories or simply fake news, or it's totally different from compared to independent and mainstream media.
Katerina, local media, independent media, and fake news.
Like that's a whole session by itself. Fast.
And
I have
conspiracy.
30 seconds to do. So it is tough. It is tough to say, because the issue of fake news and misinformation, it has all of these different aspects. Like there's disinformation, misinformation, fake news, right? There's all these terms thrown at us. And basically we're asking the public, right, to parse through information and make an assessment of what is true and what is not. Think about COVID, how we all struggled, right, to figure out what was legitimate or not, all coming a lot of times from legitimate sources, right? And that's the environment that we're living in. I haven't seen proof in any of the work, not only ours, but even in academia and all that, that there is specific brands that they're spreading more made-up news than others. We can talk about biases, we can talk about tilting the truth and all that, but in general, the completely made-up deep fakes and all that is all like a social media phenomenon, right? That's where it usually stays. And there is some evidence, at least from all the work that, not me, but also other colleagues have done, that it is in specific spaces of the internet and the social media, right? Like in those dark spaces that we also don't have access to. That's the other part to remember, that we don't know the whole picture.
Thank you. Another question? Okay, so I can take this opportunity to ask Laura a bit about the favorite word of the year, algorithms. How do we tackle algorithms? How do we ensure ethical practices?
Well, this with the algorithms is always changing because, I mean, obviously, we at Tactical Tech, the more we do is looking at how tech influences everything. But I don't think we've solved the algorithm avoidance or addressing the algorithm on social media, to be honest, because we always have to change the tactics. I mean, what we don't do is we don't go for the clickbait, and we don't go for, as Katerina said, tilting reality or even tilting our own research. So, you know, the research we do is not necessarily, it's time consuming, it's heavy work, and it takes a lot of time. So what we're trying to do is obviously package it in a way that is accessible, fun, interactive, and educational at the same time. So for us, the social media serves as one of the many things that we're trying to do in order to reach out audiences in various age groups and regions. But we don't depend on it. We choose not to depend on it because the community on social media is not ours, is that social networks community. They could drop or they could move somewhere else. So what we try to do is combine a lot with going out, creating podcasts, creating courses. We actually give a lot of workshops on the work that we do so that people can actually replicate what we do in other contexts. We have our own community that we bring people to. We go with the exhibitions, we go outside in the real spaces, and people who are going and seeing all the installations, the interventions that we do in the public, they usually then come to us on our social media, they share our stuff, and they bring more people. But usually it's a lot of people that meet us in person or in physical spaces. And what we do is we work with partnerships. Like we're always partnering. We're like we can be our partner as well. It's the style of working. We've chosen that from the beginning. We don't work alone. And I think Erin said also never work in isolation. We definitely do not work, and we cannot work in isolation. We partner with organizations in every country where we go and we want to do something. Usually we have organizations from various places around the world coming to us saying, can we take your materials, translate them, localize them, and adapt them to the needs of our community? And we say yes, because a lot of the work, I mean, actually all of the work that we have is Creative Commons. So it's out there for free. We don't even charge anyone for it.
Thank you. The clock is red and it's becoming scary. So thank you, Katerina, Laura, Erin, Diana. Thank you all for attending this session. Thank you. And if you really want to see this session again or want to forward it to someone you know that would love to see it, then it's going to be available on demand a few hours later. And of course, like, share, subscribe, comment. No, I'm just kidding. Have a beautiful rest of the day. And tomorrow, again, we hope we see you back at the forum. Have a beautiful evening.